Hey, hi everyone, and welcome to the Stickless Revolution, or all button controller, or leverless. You can call it whatever you want. Just don't call it a hitbox, or else Hitbox will sue you, at least for anything that isn't their actual Hitbox product. So I love leverless controllers, and there's been a lot of developments lately that I want to talk about and just show the options that are out there, because there are more options than ever to buy leverless controllers, and I love them. So it used to be that back in the day, you would have to buy a hitbox. It would be $200, and it was basically the first one on the scene. I think there might have been like a couple of others that were around the time period, but everybody knows hitbox. And if you want a leverless controller, you were buying hitbox. But as time has gone on, and they've got more and more popular, competition has started, innovation has started, and it's been awesome. So Mixbox was a thing. I hate how expensive this controller is, but if you wanted to have your keyboard keys on the movement keys, then you would have to use this little fella. It's built like a tank, but it's too expensive, in my honest opinion, for what it is and what it does. Hitbox controller itself used to be built with Sanwa buttons. They are a gold standard in the FGC community. They're very good. They're definitely one of my favorite buttons. Second favorite, because my first favorite has quickly become mechanical buttons. So this is a little bit of a variant. This is the Kale Chalk low profile switch that can be a mechanical button, as well as the full Cherry MX or other MX switch for a more fuller button for controllers. And this is at the heart of what is in a lot of leverless controllers now. And I haven't gotten my hands on one to try it yet, but I believe that from reviews and from thinking about it, this will be a better button overall than even Sanwa buttons are. It's just that Sanwa has a stranglehold on the FGC because that they've been the gold standard for like 30 or 40 years at this point. One of the first competitors that came on the scene was Junkfood Arcade. They came out with their Snackbox Micro. It was $200, same as Hitbox at the time. And it was more often in stock and easier to get a Snackbox Micro than it was to get a Hitbox. Hitbox was very constantly out of stock. Snackbox Micros were going in stock all the time, although there was still a little bit of a waiting period in the beginning. That has become less and less of a thing as they have gotten better and better at their supply chain. And right now, you can see that they have a Snackbox Micro for $165. Only supports PC and Switch, but if you only play on PC like I do, that's all you need. But then even more, we can go even cheaper now. So then we end up at the Flatbox. This is just one of the many makers who makes a Flatbox and sells a Flatbox, but they are one of the ones that I think is the most trustworthy when it comes to customer service, HDF. A very small outfit of like 4 people, I believe. And you can buy yourself a Stickless when it's in stock for $100, which is fantastic. That is so fantastic to have already cut down the price in half for what would normally be a $200 controller. Because trying to sell people on a $200 controller for something that they might not even like, since leverless controllers are still relatively new, sucks. That's a very hard sell. And the thing that makes all of the Flatboxes work, the inner workings of this, is a combined 2 things. It is this firmware, GP2040 CE, and it is working off of a Raspberry Pi Pico, or a couple of other different hardware boards, but the most common that you will see is the Pi Pico, because it's very proliferated and very, very cheap at $4. So all of these Stickless makers can just integrate this board and this free open source firmware into their product for very cheap, and then make a profit on what is still a $100 controller. And the GP2040 software, I love this thing. They have this web configurator that is just a dream, where you can rebind buttons and change SOCD modes on the fly without having to look at your board anymore, as in the old days of the Brook boards. The board even supports a wide variety of consoles. There's even some add-ons that you can get to make it work on PS4 and PS5. That's out of scope of this video, but you can in fact get a Pi Pico working on the PS5, which is freaking incredible. Because the thing about it is that Brook boards are pretty freaking expensive. So this is like their lowest tier board. It works on Switch and PC again. $25, not the worst. This was definitely like a boon in its own way when it came out as well. On with the cost of Brook boards. You know, if you want to get a PS5 solution working on these things, it'll be $100 or more. Probably more. But with the Raspberry Pi Pico GP2040 solution, it's going to be about maybe $25 for Magic Boots and then $10 for the extra breakout board that you have to buy. So you can actually buy a PS5 PCB for like $45 to $50. And you can build your own fight stick that way. A lot of people have taken to building their own fight sticks, their own Sticklesses. Especially because the parts have gotten cheaper and cheaper with stuff like this that you can just buy the part and put it together yourself. And obviously we remember back with the Mixbox, and now you can get something that's like the Mixbox. It's a smaller form factor. There's nowhere to rest your hands, obviously. But you can get something that is functionally the same thing with, you know, keys on for your attack buttons, but you might like that even. For $60. For $60, you can get something that's a little bit on the level of the Mixbox, with its own pros and cons, obviously. But it's the fact that you don't have to spend $200, $250 to get a Stickless that I'm just so freaking excited about. And there are many people selling Flatboxes. They range from around like $40 to $100, depending on the maker and depending on what they're doing. Hot is on the scene. Hot 42. I've seen this company around, and their products being sold possibly by third-party sellers. I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. But this is an insanely good Stickless that I have interest in grabbing at some point. And it's $81. That is cheaper than a snack box. The thing about the Flatboxes is that a fair amount of them are going to be with 3D printed parts. The SGF Bridget MX is using a 3D printed case. And a lot of the other Flatboxes are using 3D printed case. This buddy right here, the Hot Board, hey, I didn't realize that they also made this one. And the Hot 42, this is actually an acrylic stick. So you don't get the slightly rough, slightly cheap feeling of a 3D printed material. I do have to get my hands on a 3D printed stick, so take that with a grain of salt. I don't know exactly how these feel, but I do think that if you buy a 3D printed Flatbox, it's not going to feel as good as the Hitbox material or the material that Junkfood Arcade uses for their plastic controllers. Let me get this buddy up here. This is one of my favorites. This is also another Flatbox, and it's $60. It's $60 for a proper mechanical key switch Stickless. That is insanely cool, yo. Obviously, once again, we have our pros and cons. The enclosure is not all enclosured. So you got like some floating space. You're probably going to want to float your hands and not actually rest your hands on this unit. But it works. Now we have a controller that is on the level of a proper Stickless controller, and it's as expensive as a normal fight pad is. As a normal like Xbox or PS controller, because those are $60 to $70 controllers. And now you can say, okay, there's the pad, but the leverless will last longer, and it has more professional industrial grade parts. So I'm going to get the leverless because my motions can be more precise and my controller will last longer, because that's a big thing with fight pads like the Xbox and PlayStation controllers. Fighting games are so button mash heavy that you wear out your fight pad in no time at all quickly on them. People talk about, you know, Sonic Fox talks about going through many pads in a year because they're a pad player. But with one of these Flatboxes, this is actually going to last you a long time, if not forever, because you can also, even if something breaks on it, if it's a button or a key switch, you can just swap out that key switch, and it's very likely that the part that you broke, you can actually just get a replacement board or a replacement wire or a replacement switch for it. So you can self-repair your own unit. You can technically self-repair your own Xbox or PlayStation controller, but having done that myself, it's a lot harder than working in something with as much surface area as your average leverless does. And then we've gotten into the Smash boxes. Smash Bros. And their scene has also gotten into stickless controllers of late. The Frame 1 was on the scene. I love this. It looks like it's such a professional material. It was actually, the Frame 1 Heavy was out of machined aluminum. Super duper professional thing. I believe that the going price of it was $200. Unfortunately, this thing is in and out of stock, and very, very often out of stock. But once again, we've had open sourced parts. So now you can buy the Ranatadpole, which has the same functionality as a Frame 1 or a Smashbox or a box, for $130 versus the $200 price tag of those other controllers. It's going to have a smaller footprint, but maybe you prefer that. Maybe you prefer putting it in your lap and having something with a small footprint like that. Once again, you can buy your own parts and put together this stuff. Obviously, with the Flatbox being an open source 3D print project, the open source files are out there. And if you have a 3D printer or have access to a 3D printer at your library, you can make use of that to literally print your own enclosure. Or just throw these parts into a wooden box or a plastic box. People have gotten so creative with that over the years and just literally made a fight stick or a leverless out of a shoebox. You can go over to Nihongo Gamer for the process on how that works. More and more companies are making these controllers. So another professional Smash controller that's entered the scene has been the Glyph. $260, actually pretty expensive, but there are a lot of upsides here. You have very professional material. You can swap out the faceplates with other faceplates for different kinds of games and controller layouts. Very, very cool project. I like it a lot. I forgot to mention the Gram Slam. This is a controller that I've been looking at that I'm super excited to try at some point in my life. Yeah, it's another Smash Bros. Centered controller. Another rectangle, as that crowd calls it. This is just yet another maker using yet another design, but this one, I haven't seen it go out of stock, so hopefully these peeps have figured out like a really good supply chain and they can just keep this in stock all the time. But either way, it is a super good looking controller. Check it out. I can't go over the full breadth of the Sticklesses that are out there because more and more are showing up all the time and more are coming up with ideas for how to revolutionize the scene. I'm just so happy that people don't have to spend $200 anymore, because that was always a very hard price point to justify for anyone, especially since you don't know before you get your first leverless controller how it's going to feel and how you're going to feel about using it, because it's a much different thing than using an analog stick or a lever on a normal fight stick. $87 for one of the Hot 42 pads. That's acrylic. Very nice and professional. They seem like a company with a good product from what I've seen. I can't say from experience myself, but from watching reviews, it looks really good. Two communities that I'm going to shout out, two Discord communities, are the Open Stick community and Cranes Lab. These are both communities that can help you answer questions. They can show off your sticks or look at other people's sticks. And just in general, like being a community of like-minded people that are making use of all-button controllers. It's such a crowdsourced info community now. There's so many people that are willing to help you out on all kinds of things. Where to buy parts, what to do, how to wire something, how to 3D print something. And I love leverless controllers. I don't like a normal fight stick lever. I couldn't get into fighting games from using a lever. But once I bought myself an all-button controller, fighting games made a lot of sense, and I was actually able to do motion inputs and enjoy motion inputs. And I have carpal tunnel. A stickless is much easier on my hands than a fight stick is. And fight sticks are still decently expensive. But now we've gotten it to where people are selling full-blown products, all-in-one units, that are half the price of a normal fight stick. So now it's cheaper and more quality to get into Sticklesses, arguably, than it is to buy a traditional fight stick. Fight sticks and pads are still the most popular controllers in the community right now, but I think that as time goes on now, we're going to have more and more stickless players, and stickless might become the most popular controller. We just need more info, more makers, more products out there. One thing that I hope happens in the future is that we get more controllers on Amazon. I'm not too big a fan of Amazon's monopoly, but it just is a thing that most people prefer to buy things from Amazon. So there's a lot of lever controllers on Amazon, but not so many companies that are selling their leverless controller through there, other than like the Razer Kitsune. Whew. That has been a lot of talking. If you're going to take anything away from this, I think one of the safest bets for you in terms of customer service and build quality is the Bridget MX right now. Very highly reviewed company, very highly reviewed product. There are other companies that are making something that is exactly like this, other flat boxes. But having a company that will give you excellent customer service is meaningful. Open source is a very, very great thing, and it's always great when a technology sphere gets more into open source and more products are available and competitive as a result of open source. That's all I got to say about all of this. Thank you for watching. I hope that you end up with a leverless controller that you love as much as I love my leverless controller sometime. Thank you and good night.